Thanks for stopping by. This is Sanrio Carnival for the Nintendo Famicom, published by Charactersoft back in 1990. So this is just a Famicom cartridge I picked up at a flea market. I paid $10 for it, I believe. It was in good condition, and it seemed like a reasonable price for a game that came all the way from Japan. I can play this on my retro USB AVS. It's got a Famicom port, which is great. Basically, anytime I come across a good-looking cartridge, I'm probably interested, especially if it's at a good price. There were so many games released for this system, you never know how good the game could be, or if I'll ever come across that again, and I hate to leave a flea market wishing that I picked up something. This is a Hello Kitty themed game, and it comes with this whitish cartridge and a pretty clean label. After a quick cleaning of the pins, it booted up just fine. The game is in Japanese, which is something I don't speak, and although there are English translations floating around the internet in ROM form, it is nice to play off a cartridge. And this game isn't that complex that you can't manage your way through the menus to actually get to the game and play it. Reading isn't that important, but you can find the translation online if you want it. I think I have enough of this understood, at least for most of the game modes. The main menu gives you 4 different options, and according to what I found online, these are the game options. Beginner, Endless, Challenge, and then there's a 2-player option. Sanrio Carnival is one of those games where you drop blocks into place and try to align specific shapes, or colors basically, together. The first thing I thought of when this game was loaded was that this game was just like Dr. Mario. But instead of dropping pills with colors into order, you're dropping little character faces from the Hello Kitty property. Can't say I know too much about this particular character. I do know who Hello Kitty is. She was huge in the 80s for some reason when I was a little kid. And there's a frog in here called Karopi. I know those 2 characters, but the rest of these, I have no idea. Still, it's not too hard to recognize a face and arrange it in the right order. You're going for rows of at least 3. Obviously, if you get rows of 4 or 5, you're going to get more points. And when you have 3, at least 3, lined up together, whether it's in straight across or at an angle, they're going to disappear and you're going to get points. Of course, now other blocks fall into place and you keep going. I guess looking at it now, it's maybe even similar to Klax to a certain extent. I digress. The first game is Beginner, and before you start, there's going to be a special pattern at the bottom left of the screen. If you make this shape, you're going to get bonus points. It's certainly more difficult than getting 3 or 4 in a row, so it does help with the challenge a little bit. You can press left or right in the gamepad to change the pattern. You can also select between 4 music options on the bottom right, which is using the up and down on the control pad. This is a really nice function to have. I mean, I complain about some games having terrible music or no music. To get an option to have 4 different tracks, even if they're a bit repetitive, that's great. Then you select the difficulty speed, and that really is the level you start at. And then you start, and blocks of 2 are going to start to drop. And then you flip the shapes with the controller buttons, either spin them to the left or the right, and then you just navigate them into place with the gamepad. You can also press down to speed up. One interesting thing this game lets you do while you're playing, you can press pause in the middle of a game, and then you press A or B. This will actually shift the border color to the game field. What a simple and nice option. Isn't it amazing that other NES games didn't offer this type of setting? I can think how great this would have been for the game Battle Chess. It seems like such an easy thing to offer to a player, yet very few games seem to have done this. The most basic game, of course, is Beginner, and the Beginner grid is a 5x6 grid. It's going to seem really large. You have gigantic icons to play with, and there's not a ton of space on the screen. It's interesting because it's supposed to be the easy mode, but in some ways it's actually a little harder because you don't have a lot of room to play when you're moving blocks around. You don't have a lot of places to store things. Then you get the Endless mode. That's the next option on the list, and it lets you select if you want to play with character icons or just colored blocks. I thought that was interesting. You actually can switch this game to look like it's suddenly not really a children's game anymore. You can also choose the music, of course, and the difficulty. But this Endless mode offers a much larger playing field. Now we have a 7x12 grid. The rules are the same, of course. You gotta get the patterns of 3 or more, and you try to get as many points as you can. Every now and again, of course, it's gonna speed up, and it gets harder. Just like you'd expect for a game like this. Similar to Tetris, similar to Klax, I guess. Then there's also a challenge mode. Now, the challenge mode's a little tougher with this cartridge because it is in Japanese. This is a more goal-oriented game. You're going to work to get through stages with specific tasks. Far easier to understand if you have the English translated version, because it will tell you what the target instructions are. I went and checked this. I did check out a ROM patch online, what that entails. Basically, as you're playing, like the first level, it says you have to get a certain amount of rows. I don't know, it was 20 or 30 rows to get through the stage. And then another one was you have to get 30,000 points to get through the stage. So they're different targets, and obviously when you're playing this mode, that would be much easier if you could read it. So in that regard, I guess the translation is good. But for a puzzle game, this one is actually reasonable to play. It handles like Dr. Mario or Tetris for the most part, and if you play those games, this is going to feel and play similar. I mean, yes, if you don't like the Hello Kitty options, you can certainly switch to the colored blocks, and that's just as fine. And if you don't like the music, you can either switch it or just turn it down. As far as a puzzle game goes, if you're in the mood for an NES game, Famicom game, this one is not that hard to get into. It's actually pretty fun. So that's all I have today for Hello Kitty Sanrio Carnival. If this is your type of game, please feel free to like and subscribe, and hope to catch you on another video.